Hey, this is Tiffany Bova. Welcome to the What's Next Live podcast on LinkedIn. And I couldn't be more excited to have Alex Osterwalder here with us today. Number one, I've been a fan of his for so long, and we became friends a couple years ago. And when I decided I wanted to do this, and I said, who do I want to do this with first? There was nobody else I wanted to ask other than Alex. And I'll tell you why, because he is a visual teacher and I am a visual learner. So welcome, Alex. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and everybody who's in there, please, share some questions with us in the LinkedIn Live. We'll be popping back and forth between the two. But I thought we would get started on one of my all-time favorite books, The Business Model Canvas, which is different than The Invincible Company, but we're going to start here. So, it was many years ago, 10 probably, when I first learned about this book, and it changed so much of the way I thought about business. I mean, it was fantastic. It helped me decouple these complex ideas across this canvas that forced me to think differently about the things that I was trying to help my clients do. And at that time, I was with Gartner. And so it was one of those things that I needed to figure out, how do I actually communicate better to people who are thinking much faster than I am and have far more experience in a way that brings it real to them. So Alex, I'd love to start with the Business Model Canvas, because I know that that's sort of the entry point to where we are today with the Invincible Company. So take it away. Let's see what you got.
Sure. I can tell you where we started out 10 years ago. When I say we, it's with back then it was my PhD supervisor, Yves Pigneur, and today still my colleague, co-author, long-term friend. So basically, we were trying to ask ourselves, when you go from idea to real business, so I'll label my drawings because they're pretty ugly, but they don't need to be beautiful for you to understand, right? When you go from idea to this, see if you can figure out what this is. This is $100 million business, clearly, because they're beautiful flags on top, right?
It looks like it.
Yeah. So, typically in the past, people used to ask for business plans, like that would look like this with wonderful curves going up there. The problem is, anybody who's been in entrepreneurship knows that it's not a linear journey from idea to business. Entrepreneurship, innovation, same thing. Actually, it's a very messy journey. There's ups and downs. You make progress, and then customers say they don't like your stuff. Then you make progress, then they don't want to pay what you think they're going to pay. So really back and forward journey. And if you make it so far, like many good ideas, rest in peace. If you make it to here, well, then you're among the lucky ones. And we'll see afterwards maybe kind of the statistics of how many actually make it from idea to business. So this is what you call the search for the right business model and the right value proposition. And basically, when we started working on this, we asked ourselves with Yves, could we find a tool to visualize the business model that you need to find in this journey from idea? So you take your idea, you shape it with a business model, and then the thing is, because we know that our first ideas are wrong, you're going to have to change it all the time, right? So you come up with an idea, shape it with your business model canvas, you kill it with what you learned from the market. So that search means testing your ideas constantly and iterating, right? So that's kind of the path. Now, let me just dive into what this business model canvas is for a second, just to explain for those of you who don't know it. So millions of people use this business model canvas to either shape their new ideas, visualize the idea they have in mind, what's the business model of my idea, or to actually assess an existing business model. Just making sure that you can see this on the screen. So a business model has 9 components. The first one here is your value proposition. What are you offering to the market, meaning to your customer segments? Who are your customer segments? To reach them, you have channels, and I should have maybe drawn a more beautiful business model canvas. And once you are in business with them, you have a customer relationship, and you're going to get them to pay you something with revenue streams. So now we're at 5 building blocks. This is what I like to call the front stage of your business. Value proposition for customers, you reach them with channels, and you establish a customer relationship, and they're willing to pay your revenues, to pay you money with revenue streams for the value proposition. Now, behind the curtain, in your backstage, I like to call, like in a theater, behind the curtain, what customers don't see is what you need to create this value proposition. So you need key resources like technology, like patents, maybe people. You have key activities that you perform. Again, all of these to do this. And you work with key partners because you don't do everything yourself. And that leads to a cost structure of your business model. And ultimately, business is really easy. You need to have more revenues than you spend. Otherwise, you're not very profitable, right? So 9 building blocks to describe any business model. And the idea here was, let me just clean this up for a second. The idea here was that when you start with an idea, you immediately shape it as fast as you can into a business model canvas. So you shape your idea. What's the business model? And people who are really good at this, they don't just, fill out the boxes and say, oh, for this product idea, these are the other boxes and how do I fill them out? They really ask themselves, how can I create a better business model with high switching costs, recurring revenues, protectable key resources, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll show you that a little bit later, how we came to that. But so the first thing you need to admit is you don't know if this idea is going to work because your business plan over here was probably more a hallucination than a vision. So you immediately need to test this business model here. And what you're probably going to learn is that you were completely wrong. And entrepreneurs and innovators know that 90% of the time when they're really doing something new, at the beginning, they're going to be wrong. So you learn by testing in the market with customers and stakeholders or the supply chain, and you come up with a new version and you test that new version again, right? So that's the whole idea behind the business model canvas, creating a shared language to rapidly prototype your business ideas, test them and throw them away. So just draw one more thing here to show you what the logic is behind testing, because here testing and adapting is really important. And Tiffany, tell me when this is out of screen and we can't see it. So when we go from idea to a real business, we need to accept, and this is very hard for people to accept, that they have no clue. If you're really doing innovation, you don't know if it's going to work. So rather than making a refined business plan, you actually need to admit, I don't know. So uncertainty and risk is at its highest, right? You don't know if an idea is going to work. If you already know it's going to work, it's not innovation. So you're only
Alex, would you say anything different in everything you just said based on sort of obviously the current situation we're in? Because right now we got a lot of risk and a lot of uncertainty, right? And so as part of those business model canvas sort of plays and the building blocks that you had, sort of where would you focus people today?
Okay, actually, I'll get back to this one in a second, right? I'll answer your question, get back to this drawing. Right now, actually, almost every new thing we do is high uncertainty, high risk, because a lot of the things we did is not valid anymore. So let me finish this drawing for a second. I'll actually go back here and just, let me see. I'll answer your question. Once, as an innovator, once you've found that business model here, once you found it, you say, oh, I found the business model. Okay, I'm going to scale it. You actually get into a different world. You leave the world of search behind you, and you enter the world of scaling and management. So now we're going to build a really tall building. This is now a $1 billion business, okay? So this is more about managing, okay? And because you know what the business model is. What happened with COVID-19? The businesses that we had here, all of a sudden, think of the events business, think of the training business, think of airline, think of tourism. This all of a sudden is dead, okay? And now you need to go back here and see how you can adapt your business model. So you're back into uncertainty. So basically over here, uncertainty is always high when you start new stuff. And the more you get into management territory, certainty is more the case. So uncertainty goes down. But what happened is this world here, the world of managing what we have, is over, at least, until the world is back to normal. So we're all living in this space. So this applies to everybody. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. And I think, is there a moment in time where businesses, so people who are watching this both live and obviously in the replay, where they notice I've now way into uncertainty and risk, and I'm kind of in that washing machine of what's happening, and then when do I start to feel myself come back out?
So the only way, so what you need to do, and that's where we're back to this drawing here, right? So we just went from here. All of a sudden, we're over here. And here's the thing. Companies that always being good at doing both, search and manage. So I would put Salesforce in that category. I'd put Amazon in that category. I'd put Ping An, my favorite example at the moment, in that category. They're very comfortable with exploration. So right now, with the crisis, they're actually more comfortable with adapting very quickly. Take a company like Boeing, and I'll be a little bit... terrible here, is that all they did is buying back shares. Or take the airlines, all they did is buying back shares, and the share price went up, but they hollowed out the company. They had no more they had no more skills in the search, because all they did is streamline and manage the business that they had. So they unlearned, what they used to be able to do, which is search. So that brings us all into this space. And what you need to do when uncertainty is high, you only have one task, and that's the case in innovation and entrepreneurship. And right now, for all of us who have to kind of keep a business afloat, we need to reduce risk and uncertainty. Sounds kind of trivial, right? But here's the thing, there's a method to do that, and that's why the lean startup became popular. You start with an idea, you don't know, you admit. So what are you going to do? You're going to test. So let's say, now I'm going to talk here to customers, potential customers, with my new idea, and they tell me, that's a stupid idea. Did I just fail?
Right.
Did I just fail if they tell me it's stupid?
You never know. And some of the questions we're getting in is, how can I test a business model? One of them, and this is a perfect time to ask that question, right? How do you test a certain business model? And the second side of that question from David is, how do I know, or should I just copy someone else's business model, which I could cover in a second? Is, look, they are not you. They're not your brand. They don't have your customers. They don't have your employees. They don't have your culture. There are things you can take. And I think when we get into the Invincible Company, I think Alex will share lots of examples of where and how you should copy. But right now, how do you know which business model is right?
Exactly. So that's where you go and test, right? So here, let's say we just asked customers, do they have that particular pain for the product? And they just told us that's a stupid idea. I don't care. We just failed. But the good news is we learned what we shouldn't build. And, I'll give you some statistics from our book, Testing Business Ideas. And the stats come from
testing.
Yeah, look at that. Yay. The stats come from pricing firm Simon Kucher. They show that 7 out of 10 new products and services don't deliver on expectations. That means, for everybody listening, 7 out of 10 people right now are working on something nobody wants, right? Only 3 of the people, 3 percentage-wise,
but you don't know till you try, right? I mean, you don't know till you try. So that's
the point. That's the point. You try, right? You learn what you don't do, and then you adapt your idea. You make different kinds of prototypes. So here, the testing, first test was talking to customers. That's super cheap. You do it very quickly. Then you might make a paper prototype. It takes more time as a designer. Then you make a technical prototype, right? Make an iPad app or whatever. So we spend more on testing the more we know. So you don't build something to test, and I'll get to the question, how do I actually test the business model? You don't build something to test. You just try to find evidence through experiments. And that's what we did in Testing Business Ideas, showing all the different kinds of experiments that I can do to reduce the risk. So again, let me connect the dots. Down here, we said in the search, we map out our idea with a business model canvas. That's like a modern business plan on one page. But the next step is the crucial one, how to test a business model, is you ask, what assumptions do I have? What are my core assumptions? What are the underlying assumptions that need to be true for this idea to work. And that's what we call the hypothesis that you can test. Okay? And there are 3 types of hypothesis. If you know the business model canvas, everything that's in the front stage, customers, value propositions, this is what we call desirability assumptions. Do people want it? That's the first set of risks you need to test. The second set of risks is your feasibility.
Here's what it looks like. Yep.
Feasibility. Can we actually build it? That means the technology, that means the patents, that means the partners. And then the third type of risk is viability. Can we make more money from it than we spend? So we had desirability, feasibility, viability. And then we had another one, we call that adaptability. Is it the right time with the right environment to launch this business model? And adaptability means, well, today you don't want to launch a new airline or a hotel chain, right? It's not really the right time. But these are the assumptions that you need to test, and you need to test all of them. So we're back here. The more evidence you have from your experiments here, the more you reduce the risk, because now you can say, I talked to 100 people, 80 said they have that job, pain, or gain. That's the first one. Okay, well, now I know. Okay, let me do a pricing experiment. I launch a Google Ads campaign. This is my second little test. I see if people will click on an ad for a new value proposition. Oh, that ad performed really well. I haven't built anything yet, but I have evidence that people are interested, right? So evidence is all that matters in making decisions. And here's the big problem that I often see in companies. So this got really messy, so let me just draw it one more time, slightly cleaner. When we have these 2 worlds, we have explore and we have exploit. Guess how many ideas, and this is for everybody listening, how many ideas would it take, projects are not ideas, how many projects would it take to create a $1 billion business? And what I mean with that is, in how many projects do I invest $100,000? How many of these do I need in order to create one big success? Is it, super smart team? I pick one, I give them $100,000. They're going to find, and then with follow-up investments, they're going to find this $1 billion idea. Or do I need to invest in 10 teams? Or do I need to invest in 100 teams? What do you think the ratio is from here? How many projects do I need to invest in to create an outlier?
Well,
do you know the answer?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer a couple ways. One, I'm going to say that I had this very same conversation with Jeffrey Moore, who wrote Crossing the Chasm. And he has a new book called Zone to Win. And it's all about a crisis of prioritization. That if you do not allocate people, resources, investment, R&D in the explore, you can't exploit. Like you're never doing enough. Yep. And I'm doing this from memory because it was in Toronto 6 months ago. We were standing outside. It was freezing cold. I want to say I thought he said 10 to 15% of everything that you have. If you're not taking that kind of number of resources and money, et cetera, and putting that aside for exploration, especially in innovation, because it's all about crossing that chasm, right, and making it out the other side. That it's almost, this is not his words. These are my words, right? It's almost like don't do it because if you're not going to invest enough, it's like you fail before you even start, right? It's like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna go do the Ironman on the Big Island in Kona, and I'm only gonna train for 30 days beforehand. Like, you're not gonna do it, right? You might kill yourself, kind of a thing. And so don't just like put a little bit of effort into such a big effort. Like if you go back to your previous drawing, like the little house and $1 billion business. Yeah. And if those $1 billion businesses haven't been doing exploration in the 2 years before this pandemic, they're stuck in a X. They don't have anything to fall back on. So this is that, the sort of wrecking ball of COVID hitting the fact that, old business models that were no longer relevant or delivering the kind of revenue or profitability that you needed are really, really struggling. And so I don't know how many projects, I don't know number wise.
Yeah. What do you think? How many?
Yeah. How many?
So I'll tell you what most companies do. They make a small number here of big bets. So they might invest in 2 huge projects and they expect at least one is going to be $1 billion return. That is delusional, because it means managers think they're better than an entire venture capital industry. Actually, the number, and that's where the data stops, I think actually the number is bigger. 250 investments in early stage venture capital lead to one big success, meaning it returns 50x capital. And 60% of the 250 are complete failures. Rest in peace. So what does that mean?
So Alex, if I'm like, I'm listening to this and I work for a very small business or I'm an entrepreneur, there's no way I'm going to do 250 investments, right? I'm sort of a one-man band or a one-woman band or like, a team of 3. It's like, okay, we're going to do 250. And so how do you do that? And even if you work in a big organization, you might have a small team and you can't do that much.
Yeah. So it's very simple. Well, number one, if you're a small company and you invest in a new project, you're not expecting $1 billion business to come out of it, right? So if you're small, let's say we're taking $100 million business and they want to create a $10 million breakthrough, they should still invest in something like, 10 projects if you're a $100 million business. And here's the thing, here's how it works. So this is where it gets really interesting. You actually only invest for a short time in many projects, and then you kill them very rapidly. So I'll give you an example of a company that's doing this well. And this is an example from the new book, company called Bosch in Germany. 400,000 people. This is a big company again, but it's exactly the same for smaller companies. They, over 3 years, invested in 200 teams. Sorry. My Apple Pen is not doing what I want. There we go. They invested in 200 teams, a little bit more than 100,000 euro, okay? But here's what they do. After a short amount of time, 3 months, guess what they do? They eliminate 70% of all of the teams, and they only pick 30% to continue, and then again, they kill another 70% in the next phase, and they have kind of 14 or something like that emerge that will make it to over here. So it becomes a funnel. If you're a smaller company, you'll do the same thing with maybe 10 projects, with maybe 5 projects, or maybe 3. But what you need to know is you can't pick the winner. That's the most important message here. In innovation, you can't pick the winner. So if you do believe you can pick the winner, either you're not doing innovation or you're delusional. And today, most established companies, small or big, they think they can pick the winner, so they don't work with this kind of funnel, and they will increase the risk of failure. That's exactly what we do with business plans. What works over here, I'm building a new factory, I can write a business plan. I've done it 100 times. New warehouse from Amazon. But over here, business plans make no sense. They actually increase the risk of thinking I can do it, because everybody can make a great slide deck. Everybody can make a great Excel spreadsheet. And some leaders, the founder of Intuit likes to say that behind every big failure, they have a beautiful spreadsheet.
Or a PowerPoint presentation.
That's the idea here, that we need to actually work on both worlds. And as you said before, companies that were before COVID were good at exploration and exploitation. It's not either or, it's and. They are really good in this crisis because they know how to explore. So they explore a lot faster.
So Alex, I have a couple questions for you. One is from Oleg and says, I don't see how we can answer this question with precision given the nature of business as a hybrid of art and science.
Good, nice. So my answer is yes, it will always, we're talking about social sciences, right? So social sciences can never be as precise as natural science, right? However, we can measure, and this is something you'll also find in the book, we worked on it quite a bit, is we said here, let me just clean this up a little bit. Here, this part here, the reduction of risk and uncertainty. So here we have high risk, high uncertainty. When you're going from idea to existing to a business that you can scale, there are two skills you need to work on. So that was actually very good. One is designing a powerful business model. That's an art. And one of the things we put in our new book is business model patterns. So we try to show people, like in software, like in architecture, there's certain patterns you can copy. Goes back to an earlier question you asked. Can I copy something from another industry? You should. It doesn't mean you just adopt it because it's great, it's going to work in your industry. You don't know, but you can use it as an inspiration. So recurring revenues, when Salesforce, actually, it's a case in our new book, they introduced on a large scale recurring revenue subscription when the entire industry is only starting to go through that, right? That's a big shift, but that is not a new business model. That existed before, but it didn't exist in software as much. So you need to design great business models. This is the art part. Here's where we get a little bit closer to the science. You can measure the reduction of risk and uncertainty. That sounds a little bit like black magic. It's actually very simple. You qualify all of your assumptions: desirability, feasibility, viability, and adaptability. You make them explicit. What are all the assumptions? Oh, customers need to have that problem. They need to pay this price. And then you test and you show, what's the evidence I have? And the evidence can be strong or weak. Talking to people is weak evidence. If you simulate a sales and they bought something from you, even though you haven't even built the thing, and they thought they're buying the real thing, it's very strong evidence. So the more evidence you have, the more you reduce the risk. This is measurable. So we're actually now in a state where you can measure the reduction of risk and uncertainty, but it will never take away the creativity of human beings. We build software with Strategizer. We make the software for this process. The software, you need to see it more as computer-aided design. Computer-aided design didn't replace the creativity of architects, right? It leveraged it, right? Take a guy like Frank Gehry. He makes buildings that were not possible before computer-aided design. I believe in business model thinking, we'll get to the same place. Strategizer is starting to make that software that will leverage your creativity so you can come up with better business models and then test them. So that's where I think it's absolutely right to say entrepreneurship and innovation is a combination between art and science. But don't forget the science part.
Well, I'd also say that, how COVID has really impacted this. If you look back at the financial crisis, back in sort of 2008, there were entrepreneurs out there that were rapidly going through these ideas to solve problems that maybe we didn't know as businesses we had. Dropbox or WordStream or Zendesk or Uber and Slack and Instagram, they all came about in 2007, 8, 9, and 10. And so, there's a ton of opportunity when you start looking at jobs to be done, right? And what are the things that you can solve as it relates to that. So we have, let's see, we've got another question. It says, well, you just said it, that from David Walter, few entrepreneurs actually test their ideas before launching, right? Sometimes they just launch and then go, we'll see what happens. And so how do you feel about that sort of, we're going to test, launch, and then learn and test and launch again? Or some entrepreneurs get stuck in this, it has to be perfect. So how do you fall on either one of those?
I think it's changing rapidly. So, call out to Steve Blank, who's made this very popular. He's changed entrepreneurship education throughout the world with the lean, launching the lean startup movement. And then Eric Ries, a student of his, made this popular with the lean startup book. I think it's pretty rare now that we have entrepreneurs who just build. And then there's this argument that sometimes people say, yeah, but I have a big idea. I can't, it's so big, it's so revolutionary, I can't test it. Yes, you can, because the point is not to build the thing you want to test. It's actually quite the contrary. The more revolutionary, the more you need to test the foundations. Do people have that particular job to be done? Do they have those objectives, right? Does the infrastructure kind of exist? So there are a lot of things you can test before you ever build. People are confused and think they need to build something and raise money to test. That's absolutely wrong. And I think great venture capitalists now need evidence before they invest. And, this is what in the venture capital world, we call more and more metered funding. I think maybe Eric Ries coined that term, is where at every stage, you only get money if you bring evidence to the table. So at the beginning, you might get seed funding for an idea. Fine, no evidence yet. But guess what? Here, take Bosch. Only the teams that bring evidence to the table get follow-up funding. That's exactly how venture capital works. You don't show any traction, is going to get, riskier and riskier because you're not going to get money. There was a moment of overfunding where people could bake anything. What's that juice thing that was made in Silicon Valley?
Right. Crazy.
But that's dead now. With COVID-19, we're getting back to a sane thing again, right? WeWork blew up. So I think we're getting back to this sane investment mentality where you need to show some evidence to get follow-up investment. So I do think we're getting back to that. And I think there are less and less entrepreneurs who just build. And you could succeed that way. So I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just extremely expensive. And the risk of running out of money is huge, right?
Right.
That's the big risk.
So I'm going to pivot a little bit to the Invincible Company, because I know that you've been weaving this back and forth.
Yeah.
And I'd love, because it is the new book, and I am such a fan of your work, that I want to give you an opportunity to maybe just share kind of the highlights. First and foremost, I'd tell everybody who's listening in, like, business model canvas is a must-have. And then now I'm going to say the Invincible Company is equally, because there's so much to be learned. But what are the handful of takeaways that make companies invincible versus those that are a little bit more in trouble, if you will, not just because of what's going on. So we're in this Black Swan event, but I just mean generally.
Yeah. So I'm with Eve, we're obsessed by tools. At Strategize, we're obsessed by tools. So guess what we did first before even writing the book? We created a new tool. That's the heart of the book. Now, nobody needs a new tool. Nobody needs a new book. We only did this because we saw that small and large companies have a hard time of thinking of their portfolio of business models. So your business model is more at the doer's level, business unit maybe, or product division. But when you look at explore, I just erased it. Explore and exploit. I just said we have these two worlds, right? So we said you actually need to manage these two worlds. So we created what we call the portfolio map. Here's the exploit portfolio. Here you manage all the businesses that you have. And you look at two axes. We look at how much money a business makes. Is it very profitable? Not so profitable, right on here. But then also we look at the death risk. And here's my drawings this should be a skull, okay? Crossbones. Death and disruption risk.
Can you move it up a little bit? Move it up a little bit.
Here?
No, up. Because you're the band at the bottom is covering what you're writing at the bottom.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so yeah, now I see the full screen. Yep. So basically, you're looking at the profitability of a business, and you're looking at the death risk of a business. So typically, a small company starts here, okay, business small canvas, and then you grow it. It gets stronger and stronger, more and more profitable. The death risk will go down because it gets bigger and stronger. Then all of a sudden, it's up here, very profitable. You think nobody can win against you. Think Kodak, right? They were up here. And then all of a sudden, technology disruption and your business gets more risky, still makes some money, then goes down and maybe out of business. So you need to manage all of your portfolio, all of your business to get them back up here, right? Very profitable and protected from disruption. And you can do that with better business models. So great companies have business models that protect them from disruption. That's lesson number one. But great companies, they don't just rely on their existing portfolio. And that's where Salesforce is a great example. Amazon is a great example. Ping An is a great example. And we've just seen with Bosch, they're going in that direction. You also, at the same time, need an exploration portfolio where you're exploring new ideas. While you're managing what you have, you explore new ideas. How do you do that? You also look at the new ideas and how profitable could they be? Oh, great idea. It's going to make a lot of money. But that's just on paper. Now we need to look at the innovation risk. So again, down here, this is a skull. Not so good with drawing here. Let me put it, see? So When you go out and test it in the field, you talk to customers, they say, we're not willing to pay. Oh, your profitability just went down, right? You pivot, you change it, you have more evidence that they're actually willing to pay for a subscription fee. And you test more and more and more, you bring it up here, right? And then once you have enough testing, you throw it over the fence into the exploitation. That's usually happens when it's around $10 million business. And remember what we did with Bosch, we just shown, it's here a funnel. You start with several projects. In a small business, that might be 4 or 5. In a big business, that's 250. And then you kill projects and less until you have some that can make it up here. So the big lesson, the 3 characteristics of an invincible company is, number 1, they constantly reinvent themselves. So they exploit and they explore at the same time. You can't switch my...
Alex, I have a question from Josh on this, Josh Fulton. He says, what business department should own this concept of building new business ideas and testing new ideas? Marketing?
Yeah.
Perfect timing, all these questions. Thanks, everybody, for being super engaging and following along, because this is a master class in innovation and exploitation of how to build an invincible company. So,
in very short, and I'm aware I'm throwing a lot at everybody in drawing. It's very conceptual, right? But in the case of Bosch, that's what they did. Now, here is another case, Ping An, how they split it up. So we have the founder, Peter Ma, who is the CEO, and he manages the existing, founder and chairman. Now, he hired a lady called Jessica Tan over here, who is co-CEO. And Jessica Tan's job is to do this. And guess what they did? They grew the company from the top 300 companies in the world to the top 30 companies in the world. Wow. Ping An. And why were they able to succeed? Because they did something very similar to Amazon. They invest substantially in exploration, and exploration has power. That's why I was mentioning Ping An. It's a co-CEO. It's not some graduate, from university who is now chief innovation officer and reports to the person who reports to the person who reports to the person, because you will never get innovation. You'll actually get what Rita McGrath, Steve Blank and I called innovation theater. You only get real innovation when you either have a person who's very powerful, who owns this exploration, and I'm not talking about R&D, this is exploration, or if the CEO spends at least 40% of his or her time on innovation. And here, I like to call it the Rita McGrath test. Look at your CEO's agenda, and if he or she doesn't spend 40% of his or her time every week on innovation, you will only get innovation theater. It's a symbolic sign. Okay, and at Ping An, it wasn't the CEO, it was a co-CEO. So if innovation has no power, you'll only get innovation theater.
Well, and I think that's a big point here, right? And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that you have to allocate resources, money, investment, people, time. You can't kind of part-time innovate. I don't mean as a person, I mean as a company, right? Yeah. It's like part-time growing or part-time selling or part-time marketing. I mean, it's just not possible. And the one thing I often hear from startups is, if it's a very small company, is they're wearing multiple hats. And so it is kind of part-time everything, right? Because, I aspire to be an invincible company, and I don't have to be $1 billion invincible company, right? I could be a 5 million turnover invincible company, correct? So,
and that's the challenge, right? So a startup has one task, first and foremost. That's to get to a scalable business model, and that's your only task. You don't innovate while you're doing that. You're only in the search, right? But once you have an established business model and you're scaling that, you need to start looking at innovation. And there are 3 types of innovation. The first one, and I take this from Clay Christensen, efficiency innovation is making a business model you have better. Now, here's the thing. When your business model is dying, like it's happening in banking, in pharmaceutical industry, if you just do efficiency innovation, that might look very complicated with AI, etc. You're just going to more efficiently die. Rest in peace, okay? That's efficiency innovation. That's probably 99% of what all companies do. Then sustaining innovation is about extending your business model with new value propositions and business models, new value propositions and products, etc. But here's where too few companies invest energy: transformative innovation, right? So when you know your businesses are dying, and that is the case now for almost every industry I know, efficiency innovation is not going to be enough. I remember doing this with a huge conglomerate in Thailand, one of the biggest companies, and I got the leaders to put up sticky notes, the innovation they were most proud of, and then classify them. Here's how it looked. They had one here, and then I asked them some questions and said, oh, is that really transformative innovation, or is it just an idea? And they had to shift it back to over here. So most companies put all of their eggs in efficiency innovation, and I'm not saying it's wrong to do that, it's just not enough. Because if you more efficiently die with your business model, that doesn't work, right? So you need to really extend, and again, some companies have done that extremely well, like Amazon, like Salesforce, like Ping An. They work the whole range. As a startup, this is what you do first, but as soon as you're established, you need to move over here, because what we're seeing is the shelf life of business models, even for startups, is getting shorter and shorter. 2-3 years after their founding, they're disappearing because they're disrupted, right? So you can't afford to just stay on the right-hand side.
Well, Alex, I couldn't have asked for anything more for sort of this first one. I hope you guys all absolutely enjoyed this. So there was a bunch of questions on the business model canvas. Where can people find this amazing thing, which of course, as you can see, is torn up because I, completely and thoroughly and totally destroyed this book. I've made so many notes in it that I feel like it's got dog ears, it's got writing, it's got everything. So where can they download this? Because I know you have it up on your site.
Yeah, we have a tradition of giving away a lot for free. So all of that stuff, all of the tools, we want people to use it. So you just go to strategizer.com and you'll find all of those tools: business model canvas, value proposition canvas. You'll find stuff on testing, and you'll even find 100 pages of the last book for free. So we share actually always a big chunk, 100 pages of our last book for free as a teaser, freemium model. If you like it, go get the book. If you don't like it, well, you didn't waste too much time. So we give a lot away on Strategizer, simply because we believe this stuff should spread, and we don't make money from the tools, we make it from the software.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, right, this is about trying to help an entire community, a global community, be successful at doing the really hard work, which is building an invincible company. So I could not, once again, thank you, my friend. I send you a big virtual hug all the way to where, are you in Switzerland today?
I'm in Switzerland. Yeah, no travel.
All the way from Los Angeles to Switzerland. I thank you and appreciate you. Thank you, everybody, for joining. There's going to be a replay. You can click on the link below. Thanks for attending. We'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.